Houston, we have a problem.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Texans Junkies for you. I am Mark, joined as always by Nathan. And today we got a special one. We're doing the AFC South overview that we've been promising y'all for so long. But first, we'd like to welcome our first guest on the show that we've ever had. Welcome in, Josh.
What up, guys? How y'all doing?
Great, dude. Great to have you. This is a big episode, so we need some extra help. So we did call in the big guns.
Yes, sir.
But we're going to go over the entire division, team by team, and we each have a record prediction that we're going to give. And we kind of delved into that a little bit on the last episode, but we're gonna expand on it. We're really excited about this episode, so let's go ahead and get it started. Let's go ahead and present here. So these are the record predictions for the AFC South from each of us. And we're going to go one by one and kind of talk about what influenced our prediction. I'm going to start off, I guess I'll start off with me since I'm first on the graphic. But what I have is Texans 12-5, which I told y'all from the last episode. Colts 12-5, Jags 8-9, Titans 7-10. Now, real quick before I ask for input, I did say last episode Titans over Jags, and I said it was subject to change. And after looking at the schedule, I did change it. Nathan, how do you feel about this? Because I can see your record predictions. So, do you have any input on my choices here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with like the Titans being last necessarily. Like I understand that you can get away from them being last or the Jaguars being last, but the Colts at 12-5, that's a little surprising, especially being like, you know, the Texans and Colts being 12-5 is a little surprising. But I mean, I'm really interested to see what your game by game prediction is for the Colts, because I'm interested in seeing that.
Yeah, definitely much higher. I see that you and Josh were fairly uniform in how you made these predictions. Only a couple games off in total, actually. Josh, do you want to weigh in? Because I had the Jaguars 8-9, and you had them dead last. So.
Yeah, I think it's easy to clown on the Jaguars. I enjoy doing it, and I think there's a good reason to do it as well this year. I think they're a significantly worse team than they were last year. I think it's kind of come to everyone's attention that Trevor Lawrence is not as good a quarterback as was advertised in any way, shape, or form. I think he's a middling quarterback at best, and they got rid of their best quarterback on the roster by getting rid of Gardner Minshew. Yeah, it's a tough take. I think it's there. I think there's stuff to it, and I think it's easy to clown on them. I enjoy doing it, and that's why I toss them down there.
I could definitely see it happening, especially after losing Calvin Ridley, who was their most explosive receiver. 6-11 feels like their floor to me, so clearly you think they're going to bottom out here. What makes you think, and I don't disagree with saying that Trevor Lawrence is mid-tier. I would call him above average for sure. But what makes you think that he won't improve this year?
To me, I think he's past his point of improvement. You know what I mean? Like you look for a big year 3 jump out of a lot of these guys, and I mean, what is he at year 5 now?
I think he's entering year 4, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he did. You're right. He didn't have that year 3 jump. Year 2 was much better after the what's the head coach from Ohio State's name?
Day.
No. The one who ended up coaching the Jags.
Urban Meyer,
thank you. Yeah, after that absolute fiasco of a season, which was honestly entertaining to watch.
Great watch.
Just a dumpster fire. He like kicked the kicker in the helmet or something like that. Just unbelievable stuff. But we all expected him to have that year 3 jump. Just didn't happen. So very interesting. Nathan, you also had the Jags in the last. Let's talk about yours real quick. I had first of all, I had Texans and Colts tied up. We're gonna go over their schedules a little bit. I think the Colts have a pretty favorable schedule, I would say. And I was going over it, and I just could not see them getting 7+ losses. Maybe I just hold them in higher regard, but Nathan, you had them having 7 losses, even though they're still in second. Let's talk about yours. Just go ahead and tell us like what motivated your decisions here.
Yeah, so I mean, it was hard, man, because I do agree that their schedule is favorable, but you got to think that they didn't have Jags had the tiebreaker over them, so they were third in the AFC South. So their schedule is going to be a little easier. I can't remember off the top of my head where they ranked in the schedule toughness chart that we had last episode, but it was definitely easier than some other teams. Um, they play some. Obviously, they play Green Bay, Chicago, the Lions. They play some tough teams, but they also play the Giants. They play Denver. They play the Steelers. So it's stuff like that where it's kind of like we don't play those teams this year because of obviously we won the AFC South, so we have a tougher schedule. But yeah, man, it's I mean, I get why you put 12-5. It's going to be that's a pretty big prediction. Texans being 12-5 and then Colts being 12-5. But I mean, their schedule is definitely more favorable than ours. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I will say my prediction for the Colts does hinge on them not being injured, and they have two players, their best two players, I would argue, who are very injury prone. So Anthony Richardson couldn't stay on the field last year, and Jonathan Taylor, 2 seasons now removed from that big injury. So interesting. And then you have Titans. I noticed we kind of all have Titans and Jaguars in the same pocket. They're both going to be average to below average. So Josh, let's talk about yours. We both had Texans 12-5. You and Nathan both had Colts 10-7. Titans 8-9. That is the highest on any of the lists. So what are you seeing? Is it their offensive weapons? What about them tells you that they're going to be hovering around 500?
I think the Titans are a very well-rounded team. I think that's a big portion to who they are. I think they also had a pretty easy schedule this year, to be honest. I think the big swing game for me in that decision was the Jets game week 2. Depends if the Jets can come out swinging with Aaron Rodgers in them, because they play and then they have the Packers back to back. So I think it's a tough opening season. I think they start out 1-2, and then I think they kind of just stay around 500 for the rest of the time.
Yeah,
I don't think there's too much of there's a hill to climb there, but I don't think it's too steep, but I don't think it's too much. I think they can kind of middle around 500. I think that's going to be the team they start out to be in.
And not just only that, but like even last year, I mean, they beat Miami with 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
That was a team that they were not supposed to beat. And that was with a team that's not as talented as they are now. That was with a Derrick Henry, obviously. But, I mean, Henry wasn't even that. I mean, at least against us, he wasn't the same Derrick Henry that we've known for the past 5 years or 4 years. And, the Titans, they've had so many great additions, just like, they've had a couple mediocre players, but they've also added some very good, talented players like, Calvin Ridley or, L'Jarius Sneed. They strengthen up that secondary. Yeah. I mean, it's very good additions. And hovering around 500 is better than they were last year, and it's way better than they would have expected when the season ended. People were writing off the Titans. They were saying they're going to be the worst in the AFC South. And honestly, with the additions they've made, they're going to be kind of like how the Texans were. Like they could come out and make that big leap year 2 in the rebuild, new coach. Will Levis is obviously not a rookie, but he showed flashes. And if those flashes can lead to something better, throughout the offseason where he can get stronger with his reads, develop a better IQ than it was last year. But like me and Mark have said multiple times, he's limiting their ceiling, obviously. Just like any quarterback who you haven't really seen enough of, right? Because you don't necessarily know what they could be. But with what we saw, I mean, his first game he threw for 350, didn't he?
Yeah,
he threw for 4 touchdowns. I know.
I mean, he's obviously a talented quarterback, and I think he has something to prove. Whenever he was, supposed to be a top 5 pick, and then he drops to the second round, so he has a lot to prove. And I think this year he can definitely prove himself. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I will say real quick that Titans versus Dolphins game. Thank you for bringing that up because that was, I think, the most unbelievable game last season, and I feel like a lot of people forgot about it. The Dolphins were up 2 touchdowns with a little over 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
Ridiculous.
Just crazy ending. And Josh, I like that you're putting the Titans at 8-9 because they finished 6-11 last year. And let me go ahead and show last year's standings actually while we're at it. They finished 6-11 last year, and they've only gotten better. Now, the schedule's tougher, I will say, but I think they just added too many offensive weapons to be 6-11 again. So
yeah,
I'm liking that. Yeah, last year. And what you mentioned, Nathan, that was actually crazy impactful that the Colts did not have the tiebreaker over the Jags, because now they're getting a way easier schedule. That
Right.
strength of schedule graphic we went over last time, Houston Texans were 4th. Jags were hovering around 7th or 8th toughest schedule, and I think the Colts were top 15, but relatively
14 or
very
15.
doable. Yeah. For a team that I consider much more dangerous than the Jaguars. So
Yeah, I think anything outside the top 10 strength of schedule is, a pretty easy one when you compare it to the top 5.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're definitely cool with it, and teams are so much different anyway, season to season. So yeah, very interesting. I wanted to go over this graphic real quick right here. And it doesn't really pertain that much to this episode, but I love throwing in stuff that just absolutely shocks me. So you're looking at this win percentages over the last 10 years, so 2023 to 2014. The Colts, by far, have the best win percentage in our division. They're sitting at 500 exactly. And then you have Titans, Texans, and then Jags in last place at 331. Last 10 years, the Colts have won the division one time, and it was in 2014 with Andrew Luck. I thought that was unbelievable that they're 500 over the last 10 years, and they've only won the division once in that span.
I mean, the first thing that came to mind here was Peyton Manning, but this is all post Peyton Manning as well.
Yeah, because Peyton Manning joined the Broncos in 2013.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the first thing that I thought, and I was like, oh no, that's really surprising to me, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely insane. And I think the Jags have actually won the division more times than the Colts, and they're sitting at 331, which
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm
they
sorry,
went to
Jags
they went to
fans.
the AFC Championship game,
Yeah. Well, actually, I think in the last 10 years, every team in the AFC South has been to the AFC Championship game but us, which is super unfortunate. But we're hoping to change that this year. So yeah, I wanted to go over that. But let's put the standings back up.
And I want to ask a quick question before we move on.
Yeah.
Where and y'all can let us know in the comments below as well. What would be considered this year a disappointment? Is it, I mean, obviously not making the playoffs is a disappointment, right? That's a pretty big disappointment. But is it losing the first round? Is it losing the second round? Is it not making the AFC Championship game? Or is it, I mean, the biggest of them all, making the Super Bowl? Like, I've been thinking about this question, and I don't know how to answer it, but I would love to hear y'all's answers first before I answer mine, or give you my answer.
Go ahead, Josh.
I'm happy to start. I think you answered a lot of very linear things where you can say this is the big playoffs, double-digit wins, stuff like that. I think we are going to see a little bit of regression from some of our superstars just to start out. I think CJ Stroud has a ton of media attention on him this year. Obviously he was the second overall pick last year, but he's been said that he has all these weapons and this new revamped offense and stuff. And I think there might be a little bit of pressure, and I'm looking forward to seeing him tackle that. But I think there will be a little bit of expectations that he maybe hasn't had on him before. Obviously he's a cold dude, but I think he might have a little bit of pressure, and I think he might crumble a little bit under the first couple games. And that would be a disappointment to me, because I've seen him as a very cold, calculated kind of guy, almost like a killer. You know what I mean? That's who you want as your quarterback. We saw that, a couple game-winning drives last year, stuff like that. But I think there might be a chance for that to kind of sneak in, and I could see that. That would be a disappointment to me, to be honest, is seeing him kind of regress in that way.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the off-season additions sort of take the pressure off of him, because I agree that a sophomore slump is very possible. Yeah. Especially since he had one of the greatest rookie years of all time. Of course, If he doesn't grow on that, like people expect growth to be, which is linear, like you said, if he sort of maintains it even, people might say that it's been a disappointing sophomore year. But we'll see. I think that the Texans front office really wanted to make sure that didn't happen, and that's why they added Stephon Diggs, for example, or Joe Mixon, who's a very good pass-catching running back. So
he's also a decent blocker, which helps him out a lot as well.
Yeah, very good point. Hopefully, I keep saying this, I hope Dameon Pierce breaks out this year again. I think we have so many exciting weapons that hopefully that won't happen, but definitely a possibility.
Yeah, well, and I do want. I mean, I understand what y'all are saying, but at the end of the day, we spent the money. We drafted well, in my opinion. At the end of the day, as a team, as all the resources you've allocated towards your team, I understand the, CJ Stroud having some regress, having a sophomore slump, whatever it is, Stephon Diggs kind of losing it in the back half of the season, or whatever the case may be, injuries. But as a team, if you kind of put injuries to the side, because we're not going to predict injuries, obviously, I mean, what is the goal of the Houston Texans this year, given what we've done this offseason? Maybe that's how I should have put it. What's the goal? And would you be disappointed if that goal's not reached? Because in my opinion, not making the AFC Championship game in the last since we've been a franchise is a pretty big disappointment, and this is the best team we've ever had to date. So that would be a big disappointment to me, at least not making it that far, and obviously going further, which would be a dream.
Yeah, I agree, and I sort of failed to answer your question, I'm realizing. But yeah, I even though my expectations from being a Texans fan are, wow, we made the playoffs, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Even though those are my expectations, I agree that not making the AFC Championship game would be disappointing. Now, if we have a great season and still make the playoffs, and it's the season ends in a way where we're like confident we can still build on this, I'm cool with it. I don't like thinking of this as an all or nothing year where if we fail to make the AFC Championship game, we sort of do like a soft reset and tear it down a little bit. I don't like that idea, but I agree. I think AFC Championship game is our goal. Let's do something that we haven't been able to do in the past. That's definitely our goal, because I agree, on paper, this is the most talented roster we've probably ever had. Definitely rivals the Arian Foster, Andre Johnson days. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think I've seen a lot of stuff, people saying online that the window is open. You have CJ Stroud, this phenomenal quarterback, on a very, very cheap deal when compared to, Patrick Mahomes, who's pulling in $500 million. You know what I mean? Like,
or Jared Goff.
Yeah, exactly. Or, who's the Daniel Jones? Yeah, people like that. You know what I mean? Like, the quarterback pay is just going to keep rising and rising and rising. I think you have a chance to stay on CJ Stroud's rookie deal when he's getting massively underpaid, and just bring in all these people like we did this year. We brought in Stephon. We brought in a lot of people. So I don't disagree that this is the window. I think this is the time. I'm a little bit of a wider stance on the project. I think the next 2 to 3 years for me, AFC Championship game and probably the Super Bowl within the next 2 to 3 years is kind of my opinion on a success. Maybe not so immediate, but I would definitely like to see at least where we made it to last year and further out of this team.
Yeah, and it's sort of unfortunate that our entire division is looking a little bit like a juggernaut, but we couldn't be like the Titans a couple of years ago where they firmly had a grasp on this division. But
100%.
It is what it is. Let's make the most of this opportunity.
Yeah, I remember CJ on a podcast said that he thinks this is the toughest division in football.
Yep.
He had an argument, I think it was with Micah Parsons about it.
Yeah, that we talked about that on the previous podcast.
Yeah.
We were getting a good laugh out of Micah Parsons. And I know we talked about Daniel Jones's contract just a second ago, but I trashed the Giants like way too much on our last pod. So I'm just going to like smooth over that part.
Yeah.
But we're going to transition into our next segment, or it's highly related to this, but we're going to go over key losses and key additions of each team and really dive in on each team in the AFC South. We're going to start with the Texans. And we're not going to go over this one for as long because every episode is a Texans episode on this podcast. But we're definitely going to go over them just to sort of reiterate where we stand after this offseason. Let's start with our losses. I'm just going to list them for anyone who's not watching and is just listening. But Devin Singletary, Blake Cashman, Malik Collins, Jonathan Grenard, and Steven Nelson are the major losses. Josh, which one of those do you think is going to impact us the most? And maybe talk about which ones you're not that concerned about.
I'll start with the ones I'm not too concerned about. Obviously, Devin Singletary, big loss. I think he was a 1,000-yard rusher last year, or somewhat close between combined yards. But who we picked up, I think Joe Mixon is going to be a fabulous, fabulous addition to this offense. And another one I'm not concerned about is Jonathan Grenard. I think when you replace him with, I think Will Anderson now is a better player than Grenard was last year. And I think adding, Daniel Hunter is a massive, massive piece. So I think those are the two I'm least concerned about. My most concerned about is the Malik Collins. I think he was a fabulous defensive tackle for us. Huge size, really, really skilled with his hands. And I think we answered it, but we didn't answer it. You know what I mean? We brought in Autry. We brought in a lot of like defensive line, but I don't necessarily know that it was a defensive tackle. And I think the size you almost can't replace. That's why Vince Wilfork had such a good career. He's this massive dude. And I think we brought in a lot of skilled players, but I think we will have a little bit of a hole in our defensive tackle, like kind of in a center of the line kind of region. And I think that's where we'll struggle the most. That's, I think, the biggest loss for us.
Yeah, I love that take. And you're preaching to the choir because I've been saying that we did not address defensive tackle enough this offseason.
Not at all.
Nathan, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm right on board. I mean, you could even make an argument for Steven Nelson, but he's getting up there in age. And then when you're able to get two guys like C.J. Henderson and Jeff Okudah for under, I believe, $5 million or $6 million, who two former top 10 draft picks only 3 years ago. I mean, that's a huge win. So I'm not too concerned about that. I am concerned about Malik Collins. The Malik Collins trade seemed fine in the moment, but now you also thought that after you traded him, you're going to address it, right? You thought you were going to get the guy in your second pick in the draft, but you end up getting an offensive tackle, which was kind of questionable. And then you think, okay, maybe the third round, but then you get the safety that you needed to address. And then every pick after that, it was all picks you needed that were probably a little more important than D tackle. And you didn't see us come back in the first round where a lot of the defensive tackle talent was. And now, where you sit in free agency, there's not a lot of talent left. You're going to have to trade. And Foley Fatukasi, I mean, he's good, but I don't think he's going to replace Malik Collins' production. I don't think he's going to replace Sheldon Rankin's production. So Malik Collins is probably the biggest loss. Obviously, Blake Cashman, you replace him with the Aziz Al-Shaair, who I'm super excited about. Mark, Josh, I know y'all are excited about him too. So, I mean, yeah, Malik Collins is definitely the biggest loss for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was originally in Casario's plans to get another defensive tackle to replace him. And I think he just probably got outbid, honestly. And he just kind of got caught with his pants down, so to speak. But we didn't address that until 7th round, which we already talked about way too late.
Right.
Even if we're confident that Marcus Harris is going to be a standout. I mean, that's really just not good enough. I'm assuming that we're going to address that when teams start making cuts for the 53-man roster. We're going to maybe try to pick someone up there, which, okay, like that's fine with me. But we'll see if it ends up being as big of an impact as we think it'll be. And real quick, I just wanted to talk about the Steven Nelson drama. I don't know anything about it, so I'm going to pass it off to y'all because apparently something happened.
Yeah, so I mean, basically he's salty. Apparently we lowballed him. Steven Nelson should be lucky he's getting an offer because guess what? He hasn't signed anywhere else. I believe no one's probably offering him. And he basically called D'Amico Ryan's milk dud man and basically said, you need to go help the city of Houston after our storm that we had last week. How about you call out, if anything, call out the McNairs, like the billionaires. Like we're talking about the coach, and there's a lot more people that can help out financially more than D'Amico Ryans, the Cranes, the McNairs, the Fertitas of the world. Like calling out D'Amico Ryans is obviously a personal shot. He said that he had this tough guy persona. Like, all right, man, like he's obviously not coming back. I mean, that's written off. And I think he's just upset. He did the same thing last year with Nick Caserio. He said something about you can't trust a guy with the best. And, just leave him alone. He's obviously not coming back as a Houston Texan. We don't want him back. We don't want that stuff in our locker room. We built a culture in the past year, and we don't need the cancerous types of players back in the locker room. That's just not how we roll.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell he's talking about with Caserio. He looks amazing in the sweater vest. That's ridiculous. And also, I will say, I think that is 100% part of the reason why he hasn't been signed yet. Is teams are, first of all, an aging cornerback is not someone you want to sign to your roster in general. That's like not a very sexy position to sign someone who's an older veteran. And then two, he's a huge locker room risk. I mean, you look at exactly how he's been talking about Caserio and D'Amico Ryans in the media. And last year things seemed to smooth over just fine, and he played well, so no one really cared about it that much. But now it seems like he's going to be a cancer, and it's not enough reward.
It's not
for
worth
risk.
Bringing him back.
Yeah, you'd rather just draft someone and bank on them. So, Josh, any more input on the losses?
I was going to say if Kenyon Green doesn't do well, we'll just turn him around and put him on the D line.
That sounds good to me, honestly.
Yeah.
Apparently, he's looking fit. So
yeah, he is. He's
yeah,
looking
I've
pretty
heard
good.
that before about other players, but
Yeah,
we'll see. All right, key additions. Josh, how about you start us off on key additions? Which one of these are you most excited about? I know there's a lot to be excited about in this list of names. Let me go and list them, actually. Daniil Hunter, Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, Aziz Al-Shaair, amazing players, and Jeff Okudah. So, Josh, which one of these are you just the most thrilled about joining the team?
I think it's easy to name the two big names. I would say Daniel Hunter and Stephon Diggs, but for me, it's Joe Mixon. I think the Texans have had a long history of kind of recouping guys who maybe lost their favor at other teams or stuff like that. Like you look at, Arian Foster, undrafted free agent, Carlos Hyde, we had him. Who was the guy we got from the Dolphins?
Lamar Miller.
Yeah, fantastic running back for us. We pick up these guys and they do very, very well, and I think they fit into our system well. And I think Joe Mixon's another name in that line, I think I'm excited to see him because I liked him. He's been on my fantasy team 6 years straight now, something like that. And I can't get away from him apparently, but I'm happy to have him as a Texan.
Yeah, I'm just really glad we're not in like year 7 in a row of having Alfred Blue on our team, and we don't have like Duke Johnson or something. And real quick, he was fun, I guess. But real quick, I wanted to mention something, and I meant to mention this at the top of the show. David Johnson retired. And let's go over that real quick, even though it brings up scars and it brings tears to our eyes, perhaps. One of the darkest days in Texans history was the day that we traded away DeAndre Hopkins for David Johnson and a second-round pick. That's a big deal. I just want to talk about David Johnson real quick because we don't talk about him anymore. Amazing in Arizona. Great career in Arizona. He was literally the best player in football for a year and easily the best fantasy football player. When he came to us, he was clearly washed. Everyone could see it. And then we had the tandem of David Johnson, Mark Ingram, and Phillip Lindsay. And that was a difficult time to be a Texans fan. I bet you forgot that Phillip Lindsay was on the Texans for a second. Anyone listening to this, but yes.
And Ed Reed, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes, Ed Reed.
We're kind of like the current Lakers. You go back 6 years, the team will be amazing.
Yeah, our all-time team is actually pretty nasty. Like,
they're
what
all
our
their
all-time
primes,
team,
dude.
I think our all-time team is Arian Foster and David Johnson.
I would put David Johnson at 1 easily.
You know what? I'm putting Alfred Blue at 1. I don't care what you think. I don't care.
But, any guy who's got 1,000 receiving, 1,000 rushing in the same season, I'm putting him number 1.
Yeah, and we're going to move on, but real quick, I just wanted to shout him out because very interesting career, high peaks, low valleys. Let us reflect on that trade and now be glad that time is over. So,
yes.
Nathan, I'm going to pass it to you real quick. Who are you most excited about that's joining the team right now?
Yeah, I mean, mine's Stephon Diggs. I mean, we had to add the receivers. Obviously, you saw what happened when you lose Tank, and you have to rely on John Mechie, and you have to rely on Robert Woods, who's aging, and you have to rely on Xavier Hutchinson.
Noah Brown.
So now when you have 3 number 1s according to Trayvon Diggs, it's like pick your poison. I mean, you can put your number 1 corner on Stephon or Nico. Okay, what are you going to put on your number 2, who I'm going to say is Stephon Diggs at the moment? He's going to burn your number 2. And then, okay, say you have the two really nasty corners. Well, then you got Tank Dell. Your number 3 corner is going to be on him, and he is crazy fast. He was burning the number 2 corners last year, number 1 corners. So our receiving room is stacked now that we have, I believe 11 receivers in our receiving room right now. So it's going to be a very tough competition to cut that down. So,
yeah. And even though there will be cuts, I still think that that will be the most in volume on our rosters. We'll have the most receivers. I'm guessing we'll enter the season with something ridiculous, like maybe 7 or 8 receivers.
I think we'll have Stephon, Nico, Tank, and then Skoranek, Brown, Hutchinson, and
Mechie.
Yeah.
I like that.
I can see that.
Robert Woods gets cut. Yeah.
Well, that's a free $6
like
million. He's gone.
I feel like
Steven Sims is gone too, you think?
I think
they keep him on as punt returner.
Yeah.
Or practice squad, something.
Yeah, something. But
yeah, we have a lot of receivers. Super exciting. I was subconsciously smiling while you were talking about how Stephon Diggs was going to burn our other team's number 2 and 3 corners.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think overall Texans additions and losses, I think we gained more than we lost, first of all. And the positions that we lost the most in, we ended up gaining the most in. Danielle Hunter as our new edge. Super exciting. Singletary, big loss. Joe Mixon replaces him nicely. I still think defensive tackle, man. I can't shake it.
It's
but
tough.
Really exciting. So let's move on now. We talk enough Texans on this podcast. Let's go to the Colts.
Yeah.
And the Colts, and sort of had the most boring offseason in history. I'm not going to lie. But definitely the few moves that they made were really interesting. Key losses: Gardner Minshew, who was their starter for, I believe, 13 games last year; Zach Moss and Jacob Martin, who I believe played for us a few years ago. I'm going to start on this one. I think Zach Moss was a very underrated departure for them because behind Jonathan Taylor, they have Tyler Goodwin, who dropped that crucial pass in Week 18. And who else? Like, I don't know who else they have. Zach Moss was an amazing 1-2 punch with Taylor. I think he's going to be awesome with the Bengals. And then Gardner Minshew is going to be replaced by the feared Joe Flacco next year, who honestly probably will not be able to fill Minshew's shoes as a backup. But yeah, I think Zach Moss was a huge loss. Other than that, a lot of continuity on the roster. Do either of y'all have any thoughts on anyone who left?
I would agree with you. I think Gardner Minshew is a big loss. I think there's a reason the Texans have kept Davis Mills around, is he's a serviceable, backup. I think Gardner Minshew is exactly what you need on a team like that. I think Anthony Richardson coming off a huge injury, missed the whole season, and it's still his rookie year technically. He doesn't have that game experience above college. He doesn't have all that kind of stuff, and I think you need someone with all that experience. And obviously Joe Flacco is a good replacement there mentally. I don't know. For me, I wouldn't trust Joe Flacco going out and throwing what I need to, make a playoff game. We saw it last time. He started a playoff game and absolutely fumbled the bag. So I just wouldn't trust him. I think Gardner Minshew is he can be that guy for people sometimes. He steps in, has 2-3 unbelievable games, goes right back down to earth. But he has those abilities to step up. And I think if Anthony Richardson get hurt, I think the season's over for them, honestly.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. Honestly, like, I think people are kind of forgetting about, like, if you lose Anthony Richardson, like, that whole 12-5 thing, that whole 10-7 thing is out the window. They're not. I mean, Joe Flacco can win you games. He proved that last year. But when it comes to the big games and turnovers, by the way, I mean, he didn't throw like 10 picks in the first first 4 games he played or something like that. Some crazy number.
Yeah.
Like, he's a turnover machine, and he's 40. Like, he is not he's not Baltimore Joe Flacco anymore. And losing Gardner Minshew is a huge loss, not only because he's a great player, but you're done for if Anthony Richardson's done. Like, if he gets hurt again, you have nothing. And now we're talking about Jacksonville being 2 or Tennessee, and then the Colts dropping down and completely falling apart. I mean, unless their defense can hold it down, which it could because they have a good D-line, but their secondary is not there. And if you lose Richardson, it's going to be a tough time this season.
Yeah, I completely agree. And let's real quick go to the additions because I want to talk about Joe Flacco. One more point. I just think that he and Gardner Minshew are such opposites. Like, they're both sort of in the same stages of their career. And I sincerely wish Gardner Minshew the best. I hope he balls out with the Raiders. I really do. He's a nice guy.
I mean, he's starting.
Even though he's played for the Jags and the Colts, who I'm not fond of. I hope he does great. I hope he leads the Raiders to a wild card spot. Hopefully not at the expense of us. But yeah, Joe Flacco's kind of the gunslinger who, hey, he'll throw 4 touchdowns, but he'll throw 3 picks. But Gardner Minshew's the guy who all game he's very smart quarterback, and he's going to compile yards and maybe have a 1 or 2 touchdown game. And he's going to be very trustworthy with the football. So
Sneaky athletic.
Yeah, sneaky athletic. Key additions for the Colts. Really no one outside of the draft. They didn't make any big splashes. Laiatu Latu, who we've already talked about in the past, number 1 defensive player in the draft, taken. And then wide receiver A.D. Mitchell, along with Joe Flacco. Not a whole lot to talk about there. A.D. Mitchell was a good pick. I think he's going to be great with Anthony Richardson. And then Laiatu Latu. Colts could have traded down there, but I think they honestly made the right choice in picking the first defensive player off the board in the draft at number 14 or 15. So
yeah, I think that's the real problem with the Colts is that we're talking about their draft picks as key additions. You know what I mean? Obviously, you look at the Texans and they have, C.J. Stroud come in last year. That's a key addition, but he's the number 2 overall pick. He's a quarterback. He's not a defensive lineman at 14 overall. If that's arguably your best pickup, what are you doing in the offseason?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all they did was bring back in-house. I mean, they just kept Michael Pittman. They extended him.
Exactly.
They got some corners. Stuff like that, but nothing crazy.
There's
And
nothing wrong with it if you're the Chiefs and you're coming off winning Super Bowl or something like that. But when you're
right,
finishing third in your division, you got to do something.
right,
Yeah,
for sure.
and I
Maybe
still
they just
think
believe.
that.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, continuity is huge in the NFL, coaching staff and players, and they also have Matt Gay, who I still think is a severely underrated kicker. Very, very good kicker, and kickers win you games. So, all right, Jacksonville Jaguars. They had a lot of turnover this offseason. We can argue whether or not it was for better or worse. I think that they have a lot of questions still on the roster, but let's talk about their key losses. Calvin Ridley is the one that stands out the most, their most explosive wide receiver. Then you have Rayshon Jenkins, their safety, and Foley Fatukasi, who obviously we picked up. Right. So how do you all feel about this? Because we know that they slapped a Band-Aid over Calvin Ridley with Gabe Davis, and then they drafted Brian Thomas. How are we feeling about their losses? Because maybe they're not plentiful in number, but I think they lost some important pieces.
I think when you say Band-Aid, it's like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. Gabe Davis is very overrated, and Calvin Ridley is replacing his production with Gabe Davis is nothing to me. I'm not worried about Gabe Davis. He had a great year with Buffalo when he had 3 touchdowns in a playoff game and still lost. And then after that, he's kind of just been whatever. And then he hasn't really been healthy. I mean, he wasn't even healthy with the Bills towards the end of the year. So, he doesn't worry me at all. But when we're talking about the losses, Calvin Ridley's a huge loss. I mean, you saw what he did to us. Like me and Mark had this discussion, Josh. Calvin Ridley has those games where he can be the game changer, and he was that with us. And it could be a problem with our secondary, or it could be just he's so talented and he's experienced. And Calvin Ridley destroyed us in most games that he was on with the Jaguars versus us. Mark, we went to the game where he had a great game, and Foley Fatukasi, I'm honestly not too familiar with. If we're being completely honest, I do know he's a great run stopper, and I'm glad that we got him. And by the way, we got a lot of in division players like Danico Autry, Azeez Al-Shaair, Foley, stuff like that. I thought that was pretty cool. But Rayshon Jenkins losing some secondary help for Jacksonville is key. Their secondary isn't all that great, and losing a secondary piece is kind of a big disappointment.
And in this
Josh,
division too, when you're losing secondary pieces, when you're going up against wide receiver cores like the Titans and the Texans do, right. I think that's troubling. I know they added some people too, but we'll see, because I do consider their secondary the weakest, if not maybe the second weakest in our division. So that they could fare poorly.
Josh, what do you think about those losses?
I think the losses themselves aren't too devastating when you think of it as just person to person, because I do think Gabe Davis can be a good player for the Jags. But I think when you move on to the ads, it is Gabe Davis, and you take his contract at $40 million. That's a big number to pay for at best wide receiver 2 kind of speedster guy, and that's your number 1. You know what I mean? I just don't see that being a huge success.
Yeah, I think Christian Kirk is still considered their number 1. I will say Gabe Davis and Calvin Ridley are both pretty similar in that they're very streaky, but Calvin Ridley's highs are so much higher than Gabe Davis's highs.
Without a doubt.
And then Brian Thomas. Yeah, Brian Thomas, we just really don't know. Calvin Ridley, sports betting. Yeah, that was when the Jags added him after the Falcons suspended him. I was a little scared there, but I guess he was a one-year wonder. Yeah, me too. They gave up practically nothing for him. Yeah. But I think the Jags expected to keep Calvin Ridley over this offseason, and then the Titans threw a huge pile of money at him, and he just couldn't say no. And I think the Jags were caught flat-footed there. But yeah, let me go over the Jags key additions. Gabe Davis, as we just talked about, center Mitch Morse, safety Darnell Savage, Eric Armstead from the 49ers, defensive tackle, which was a big add. And then perhaps the biggest add of the entire offseason, quarterback Mac Jones.
For any team.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's a plug-and-play immediate starter there. We'll see how that goes. Big camp battle to be seen between Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence. Any more thoughts on that? I know Eric Armstead was a huge add. Not really familiar with center Mitch Morse, if I'm being honest. But Nathan, how do you feel about these additions?
Yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. is also with the Jags now. They drafted him in the first round. Huge steal. Mark, you liked him. He dropped way further than probably anyone thought. Along some other players that dropped way further than we would have thought. But Mitch Morse, he's been, he was with Buffalo for years. He's a really good center. Darnell Savage, that's a good addition after losing Rayshon Jenkins. Eric Armstead, oh my God. I mean, what an addition. I mean, when you have Josh Allen and then you have Trayvon Walker, who's obviously a disappointment, considering that you took him over Aiden Hutchinson. Eric Armstead is a bona fide top defensive tackle in the league. We actually traded for him. And then that completely fell through. It was supposed to be Malik Collins and a 7th rounder for Eric Armstead and a 7th rounder or whatever, but we refused to take the contract, which makes sense when you have to pay him, I believe it was $18 million, which if you did that, you probably don't get Stephon Diggs.
Right.
So I'm taking Stephon Diggs over Eric Armstead, but it is a huge loss, and especially him going to a division rival. That's what hurts the most.
I think it helps me that he went to the Jags and not the Colts or the Titans.
I agree. I like that more. And also another addition that we didn't put up was Montez Sweat, the other tackle from Texas.
You're talking about T'Vondre Sweat.
T'Vondre Sweat, thank you. Not Montez
and he
Sweat.
went to Tennessee.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. Yeah, we'll go over the Titans shortly. I completely blundered.
Montez Sweat is with the Chicago Bears.
With the Bears from the Commanders. Yeah, now I'm on the same page. Yeah, that was the Jaguars. Let's go ahead and move on to the Titans since apparently I'm dying to get to them. Key losses from Tennessee. Running back Derrick Henry. He's finally out of the division.
Thank God.
We can come out of our houses. We can come out of our houses. I know we held him to like 15 rushes, 11 yards once last year. But the 15 games before that,
1,500, it felt like.
They were look. Yes, it did feel like
Texans
that.
fans do not get too comfortable because you're gonna have to play him and Lamar Jackson on Christmas.
Right.
So
yeah,
with a three-day rest for that.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. So Derrick Henry, key loss. Azeez Al-Shaair and Danica Watry, and that sounds familiar. I think they're on our roster now. So where the Titans lost, we gained. Let's not get too cocky. This is all on paper right now, but huge additions for the Texans. Let's talk about these because the Tennessee Titans are a team that sort of did a soft reset on last season. They got rid of some of their older players and sort of freshened up their team, so to speak. Which one of these players do you think is going to be the biggest loss, Josh?
For me, it's going to be Azeez Al-Shaair. I think he's a very rangy, very speedy guy in the linebackers. I think he's one of those underrated guys. You don't really hear about him, but D'Amico loved him. Obviously, he wanted that guy. He went to go pick him up. I think D'Amico sees a lot of himself in that, and I can kind of see that too. These really, really quick, smart guys. I think anytime you find a game-breaking linebacker like that, it's a pretty big deal. Obviously, Derrick Henry, it helps that he's gone, and it helps that he's like softened the blow by what you said, the last like 15 yards on whatever touches he had and stuff like that. Big loss, but I think Azeez Al-Shaair especially helps him coming to us. I think it's an immediate 180-degree flip. It turns a negative for them into a positive for us. It's a huge impact, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that was the biggest loss and the youngest of those players, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Henry, it was time for him to go. I know a lot of Titans fans wanted to see him retire a Titan, but your tandem now, with Tony Pollard and of course I'm blanking on his name
Spears.
now. Tyjae Spears, thank you.
I like Spears.
Is going to be very deadly. Yeah, I like Spears a lot too. He's phenomenal. Not a whole lot else to say about the losses. Definitely some key players. Nathan, let's go over the additions real quick. You have cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver, and Tony Pollard at running back. They all were paid handsomely by the Titans. Which of these do you think is going to make the biggest impact?
All of them. All of them are going to make the biggest impact. L'Jarius Sneed is a top 5 corner. They needed secondary help. Obviously, their defense, they've lost key players, Danica Watry and Azeez Al-Shaair. They're hoping that some of their draft picks pay off. They're also hoping that some of that depth behind those guys are going to pay off. You don't have to worry about that with L'Jarius Sneed as your CB1. Like, he's a bona fide number 1 corner in the league. Like a cornerback 1 on any team, mostly for the most part. Calvin Ridley, obviously, that adds depth at wide receiver.
Definitely a huge
very
vertical
athletic.
threat.
Yeah, he's very athletic. I mean, you got DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley. You got
Oh,
Traylon Burks,
Tyler Boyd.
Tyler Boyd. I mean, come
Yeah.
on, man. Like, that team is going to be. That's what I said. Like, and Josh, I even told Mark. I believe it was the last episode, or the episode before that. We need to start looking at the Titans receiving core as very, very competitive to ours. Like, I mean, I will take ours over theirs, but man, they are some dogs in that. I mean, their wide receiver 4 is Tyler Boyd. Their
Yeah.
wide receiver 3 is Traylon Burks. Their number 2 is Ridley. Their number 1 is D Hop. Like, come on, man. Like,
Do you think D Hop is 1 over Ridley?
I think D Hop
Yeah.
is 3.
I would
You think
think.
D Hop's 3? Josh,
Oh, man.
expand, please.
He's
I think
old.
he's 2. I think he's 2.
I think he's old. Tyler Boyd, number 2. Ridley 1.
Oh,
Interesting.
man.
I think Tyler Boyd's old too, though. But I think D Hop is just way too good to be number 3. I think Ridley's going to be emphasized in the offense because D Hop's going into his 12th year. Like, he is getting older, but last year he was still making amazing plays.
I think he's just like Andre Johnson. He's on his tour of the league after he left the Texans and didn't do much.
Yeah,
And look, they even
that's
have Nick
fair.
Westbrook-Akine, which actually played pretty good against
Yeah.
us a couple times. And on their depth chart, they do have Ridley 1, Hopkins 2, Boyd 3,
Yeah, I
Traylon
think
Burks
that's
4,
right.
Nick Westbrook-Akine 5, and that's about kind of the most you'll get.
Do they
But
still have? He was on the Texans. What's his name? He was a key role for them last year over the.
they got Kyle
Stretch.
Phillips, Jaquan
No.
Jackson, Kiaris Jackson, Trayshawn Harrison, Colton Dowell. No, none of these sound familiar.
Hold on. I'm gonna find him.
I think
But I mean, the thing is, like, the Titans, they've added so many key players, and I struggle. And their running back room is, man, that's. I mean, I want to say top 5, man. Tyjae Spears is a dog. Tony Pollard had a down year last year, but they were also, the Cowboys were trying to find themselves. Like, I just don't think they used Tony Pollard correctly. And they're obviously a defensive-driven team. They're not really like, they have a great offense to an extent, but after Zeke left, I mean, it kind of fell apart for Tony Pollard. He was better as his backup than he was a starter. So,
Yeah, I think it'll work well for him. And the player I was thinking of was Chris Moore, who I may not be on the Titans anymore, probably not.
yeah,
but
he's not.
he was on the Texans in the good old Brandon Cook, and also DeAndre Hopkins days. So
I think it leads us pretty easily into the limiting factor for the Titans being Levis.
Yeah,
pretty
definitely.
easy. They
We'll
have these fantastic offensive weapons, but you can't get the ball where it needs to go. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
look, here's what we're gonna start. So obviously we've kind of gone over the Texans. Mark and I have gone over the Texans. So we are not going to go over them. But Josh, we would love for you to go over your win-losses. You can go over it game by game and kind of give your thoughts, and just go over it game by game. We'll kind of ask about your losses, and let's see how we feel about the games that you have us losing and the games that me and Mark have us losing as well. So if you could start with the Texans, that'd be awesome.
And real
Yeah,
quick, are we only doing the Texans or are we doing every team?
No, we're doing all the teams, but we're going to start with the
Okay.
Texans.
I'm slightly unprepared for this. I'll get up the schedules. I have all the wins and losses written down. But let's not do every single game. Let's do key games.
Yeah, I think a key game for the Texans is Week 1, Colts. Set the tone for the season. I have us winning that one. I think you go back to previous what happened last year. I think we were a better team than we are now. I mean, a worse team than we are now. I think there's more on the line then, but I think it's important to set the tone. I think CJ and the rest of the crew knows that. D'Amico knows that. Caserio knows that. I think they're going to set the tone, get it ready early, and get the season rolling. I think Week 1's a big one for us, and I expect to win it.
Yeah, for sure. We also have actually, Mark, you had us losing that game.
I have us dropping the first game.
Yeah, I have us winning that game, picking up right where we left off. Go back to Lucas Oil Stadium where we got into the playoffs and beating them Week 1. Yeah, no, I like that. And here's I actually have a good question. I think this will bring. First of all, I also have the Bears, us beating the Bears.
Yeah.
Just because I think Caleb, that's too early for Caleb to kind of get on fire, especially against a defense like ours. But I want to ask you about Week 7, Green Bay Packers. I have us losing that game. Mark has us losing that game. Do you have us losing or winning that game?
I have that listed as a certified trap game. Absolute loss there for us.
Okay.
Man.
But can you even call it a trap? I mean, like, you're at Green Bay, and Green Bay is no team to be messed with. Like,
That's what I mean.
last year they beat the Cowboys handedly in the first round of the playoffs at Dallas at that. So
Yeah.
Dallas was what, undefeated at home that last year up until that point. Like,
100%. I think
I have us as a loss too, though.
I think Jordan Love's coming into his own. I think they have a very strong, just all-around team. I think their defense is really good. But again, I think this is a quarterback's league through and through. I think CJ puts us in position to win every game, but I think Packers. I think we're gonna have a lot of wins. I think we're gonna be 5-1 going into week 6 or week 7, whatever it is. But I think we lose to the Packers there.
Okay, so real quick, one of the games that really stuck out to me is you had us losing against the Vikings. And I want to hear your opinion. I want to hear your opinion on the Vikings. I think that they are going to be a middling team at best. I know they got some weapons. Why do you think we're going to lose against the Vikings?
I think the Texans feel very soft against elite wide receivers a lot of the time. We've talked about Calvin Ridley going absolutely ham on us. We've seen, what's the guy from the Colts who went nuclear on us every single
Michael Pittman.
T.Y. Hilton.
Oh, T.Y. Hilton, yeah.
I think there's game-breaking wide receivers always do well against us. And I can see, whoever's quarterback in the Vikings at that time, I think it's going to be J.J. McCarthy. I don't see it being whoever, Sam Darnold. I think McCarthy's going to have a good game. I think it's going to be his first career win. And I think, we keep rolling past. We'll be 2-1 at the time after the loss. But I think again, I see it as a trap game. I really do.
Okay, interesting. Yeah,
that
maybe
makes sense,
somewhat
honestly.
Similar to the Panthers game last year for us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
that makes sense.
There's a reason no one's gone undefeated,
Yeah, and it also
loses, and I think 12-5 is an excellent record, but you drop a couple games that are just stupid.
Yeah, it never goes the way you think. Like, we're better than these teams, so we'll beat these ones. It's like, no, there's always going to be upsets.
If that was the case,
completely agree.
Every team would go 17-0, one season,
Yeah, and the way I look at it is, I know you said that we do tend to crumble to game-breaking wide receivers, and I agree for the most part, but I really think as of late that we crumble to the elite running backs. And unfortunately, in the last few years, there have been 2 in our division that can be classified as elite, Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry, that have absolutely run all over us. And that's why I'm worried when we play teams like the Lions, who have Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think Gibbs is going to be an absolute stud in this league.
That's a loss for us on my schedule as well.
Yeah, exactly. I just get very nervous. I have us losing the Jets and Breece Hall. I just get worried when we play running backs like that, especially when we don't address defensive tackle.
I think it's changed there a lot for me. I think we do have a pretty skilled defensive line. Obviously, we're missing a little bit of size. But I think when you combine Christian Harris and Azeez Al-Shaair and, whoever our third linebacker is, the guy we drafted last year, they're all fantastic. They're all speedy, and they're all able to do what they want to do. I think it's going to be a really strong pairing back there, especially between Azeez and Christian Harris. I think Cashman's a very, very good middle linebacker. He's a very good Mike. But he doesn't have that speed. I just don't see him being able to track down a running back the way Azeez and Christian Harris can.
Yeah, that's the position group that I'm most excited to see this next season is linebacker. Christian Harris was absolutely breaking out like you don't see very often. He was just electrifying and pairing him with Azeez Al-Shaair. Wow. Yeah, he was our box and one guy. Like he took on
any offense that game.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Hey, so look, let's go. We talked about the Texans. We obviously think that they're going to be the best team in the AFC South. Let's go to the number 2 team all across the board, the Indianapolis Colts, and go through what we think is their most important games to win and the ones that we have them losing. Mark, if you want to start off, I would love if you could start off with Jacksonville week 5. I think that'd be a good because obviously I have us beating them week 1. So I want to see the other divisional game week 5. What do you think about that one?
Texans versus Jags?
No, this is Colts. We're talking about
that's
Colts
what I thought. Yeah, for the Colts, And I'm having to look at two separate sources of information, so bear with me. But for the Colts, I actually have them getting off to a slow start and then heating up like crazy at the end. Their schedule really softens up in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
But Colts, I have them dropping games to Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears back to back, and also dropping the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 5. I'm gonna give the advantage to the Jags in that game because it's an away game for the Colts, and I also think the Jaguars are a good team. But the schedule softens up for the Colts so much in the second half of the season. I have them winning. Let me see.
I have them with 2 losses in their last
8 of their last 9. Yeah, I only have 1 in their last 9 games.
Yeah.
So yeah, my prediction here is extremely specific, and if it hits, everyone will remember this prediction for years and years to come, perhaps longer. I have the Texans going 5-1 in the division. We split the series with the Colts. We sweep the Titans and the Jags.
Yeah,
I have the Colts. I have the Colts going 4-2 in the division. They split the series with us and the Jags, and then we get the tiebreaker. Both teams at 12-5. We have the tiebreaker over the Colts, and we win the AFC South. That's my prediction. If it hits, I'll be a legend. If it doesn't hit, don't worry about it. But yeah, I just really have. I think I just have a higher opinion of the Colts than y'all two do, which awesome. That makes for some great content that we can argue about how good the Colts will be on the podcast. But I'm very worried because the glimpses we saw of Anthony Richardson last year were pretty scary, and Jonathan Taylor has been a problem for us for years now. And if they have that continuity with a great coach, what's his name from Philly, Shane Steichen, going into year 2 of that regime, then I'm a little worried. I think they are easily up there with us. I think of the Texans and the Colts as one group of teams in this division, and then the Jags and the Titans as a lower group. It looks like y'all do as well based on your record predictions. But yeah, y'all both have them at 10-7. I want to hear some of your key losses, since clearly I don't have the Colts dropping as many games as y'all.
Yeah, I'll go first. I have Colts obviously starting off 0-2, losing to the Texans and Green Bay. Then they lose they split the series with Jacksonville Week 5. They lose that one. They lose. I think that they will lose to the Titans and the Dolphins back to back. So starting the season through Week 7, I have them at 5 losses and 2 wins. And then they start picking it up. Texans win, Vikings win, Bills lost, Jets win, Lions lost, Patriots win, Denver win, Titans win, Giants win, Jacksonville win. Like kind of like you said, Mark, like towards their back half of the season, their schedule is super favorable. They're playing, in your opinion, the worst team in the league in Week 17. So if they're in a situation where they need to win 1 or 2 games to, win the AFC South, or 1 game, look at the schedule. Giants, Titans, Giants, Denver is your 15th, 16th, 17th week. Can you even ask for a better ending?
Yeah, their week 16 and 17 is Titans, Giants, and ours is Chiefs, Ravens. It's a huge difference in the back half of the schedule. That's what worries me the most. And I'm also worried that they're going to pick up steam going into the playoffs, whereas we might be a little bit more battered. That's what worries me. So I don't know. We'll see. But
Josh, what do you got for the notable losses, notable wins for the Colts? Whatever you feel like you need to mention.
I think a notable win is I have them beating the Packers.
Okay.
Week 2. I think another notable win I have. I don't actually have many notable wins for them. I think they just kind of have an easy schedule, but I think they have a couple notable losses. I have them losing to the Jags and the Texans, but in Week 1 and Week 5. And then I have them going 2-4 in the division. They split Jags, they split Titans, and they get swept by us.
Yeah, definitely possible. Definitely possible.
Yeah. So I have them going 2-4.
Cool.
Nice.
Not great.
Yeah, not a lot of hot takes because the Colts do have one of the softer schedules in our division. So
the more I look at it, the more kind of ridiculous it gets.
Yeah.
So now I would like to talk about, in my opinion, the third best team in the AFC South, the Tennessee Titans. This one I am excited to talk about. I'm very excited about the Titans season. I mean, I look, as a Texans fan, it's kind of hard to say you're excited for the Titans season because of all the drama that's going on. But it's ever since you've been through the downfalls of like being a Houston Texans fan, where you see your team basically sold away for nothing, and then going through all those hardships. Like, it sucks seeing other teams go through that. Honestly, like, because I love sports, I love watching these sports, and it honestly like helps people. Sports help people get through their weeks. Their team wins a game and then they're excited, and I don't like seeing teams. I would never wish on my worst enemy trading away DeAndre Hopkins in his prime for David Johnson, who just came off an ACL tear, and whatever pick we got from him that wasn't worth anything. And then the guy that has been with your franchise, who we thought would retire a Texan, request a trade. Like, people will never get that. They'll never know the pain of that. JJ Watt I was referring to. So, like, stuff like that. But I am excited, and I do have the Titans starting off 0-3, losing to the Bears, Jets, and Green Bay, and then I do have them winning against Washington, Mark, which is kind of weird because like I do think Washington will be the second in the NFC East, because I do expect them to be pretty good, but I think Tennessee will take care of them. So that's one of my more notable wins.
Yeah, I'm looking for, and like I said, I came a little ill prepared against Washington. I originally had that as a loss, but then I counted as a win because really for no good reason. They are away in this game too, but Washington, they're just a little too young. I know you had them beating out the Cowboys in our last episode for second place in the NFC East, which I love the take so much. But I still think they're a little too young. I think the Titans are just a little too stacked at the skill positions to drop that game. Similarly to you, I have them starting out 1-4, I believe. They win the first game against, who is that? The Bears. Because like you said earlier, I think Caleb Williams starting out might get off to a slow start. They are a very talented team. And then I have them dropping games to the Jets, Packers, Dolphins, and Colts, who are all really good teams. We'll see what the Jets are like. That's actually probably one of the most exciting teams of next year because we just don't know what they're going to be like. We're all assuming they're going to be good, but we know what happened last year. So, yeah, I have them getting off to a tough start. I know y'all had the Titans third in your division rankings. I do think of them and the Jags as sort of a toss-up based on who finishes third and fourth. I would look for some key wins and losses, but I'm a little disorganized. So all I'm going to say is I have the Titans dropping the last 3 games of the season, all division opponents.
I also have that same thing.
Yeah, and all away except for the Texans in Week 18, where I think we're going to be playing for our lives and we're going to beat the Titans. And I think they'll have little to play for, although I'm a little worried about that scenario too.
I mean, I don't know about playing for our lives if you have us at 11-5 at that point in the season, but
I mean, I have the Colts at 12-5 with us, so we'll see. We'll see.
Josh, what do you think about the Titans?
I have them starting out 2-5. They win versus the Bears. They win the Dolphins game, but they lose Jets, Packers, Colts, Bills, Lions. I think it's a pretty tough schedule to start, to be honest, especially for a team that I don't consider amazing. I think they get it right back to the Patriots. I think they keep going with the Chargers, but again, I don't know what it is, but I like the Vikings this year, man.
Interesting.
Can't get over it. I have them losing to the Vikings, I have them losing to the Texans, and then Commanders win, Jags win, lose to the Bengals. I think they beat the Colts, beat the Jags, and lose to us.
Yeah, I like that. And maybe a quick episode idea. Maybe before the season starts, we can do some sandwich props and sort of look at the betting odds for win totals on the season, and we can each take a side that we think like, hey, I have the Vikings under 7.5 or whatever their win total is, and you'll take over, and we'll see who does the best in the sandwich props at the end of the season.
They probably have like a 4 projected win right now. Like I'm way overvalued.
I think more than that. They have a good team. Running back, who do they have at running back? Madison's on the Raiders now. They have
Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones, that's who they got. Yeah, maybe they won't be too bad. I don't know, but we'll have you on again for that episode because I like that idea. We'll put something together for that.
Yeah. So now after we've talked about those 3, let's go to, in my opinion, the last team in the AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars. I have them at 7-10. So here's where it's going to be. This is the team I'm actually ready to talk about. I have them starting off 0-4. Miami, Cleveland, Bills, Texans. They lose all those games. Week 5, they play the Colts, they win. Week 6, they play the Bears, they win. Week 7, they play the Patriots, they win. Week 8 against Green Bay, they win that game. And the reason I say that, there's no way Green Bay's sweeping the AFC South. It's not happening.
That's where you want to take your stand.
Well, look, because here I wanted to be realistic with the Texans, obviously, because if I took that win, then I have them at 14 and 3. So I'd rather just give us a loss, be kind of humble in that way. But I do think the Jaguars could win that game and kind of like stand up for the AFC South in a way, like, hey, you're not going to sweep us this year. So I have that. Eagles loss, Vikings win, Detroit loss. Then they have their bye. Texans loss, Titans loss, Jets loss, Raiders win, Titans win, Colts loss. So I think it's going to be a very up and down season for Jacksonville. 7-10 is kind of like I think Josh's record at 6-11 is kind of like close to their floor. Their ceiling for me is like 9-8. Like I just don't see them being all that great, like at all. They're not a playoff team in my eyes. I don't even see that as a ceiling. Like I think 9-8 is probably their ceiling, and then 6-11 is kind of their floor. But yeah, so that's what I have for their
big difference in the NFL.
Yeah, let me say real quick, the reason why I think the Jags ceiling might be a little higher than 9-8 is just because we talked about last time they were like the unluckiest team in the NFL last year with close calls on scores and unfavorable penalties and play calls and whatnot. So I think that could factor in. And if Trevor Lawrence does break out this year, which he's still young and there's still time, then this could be a three-way race between Texans, Colts, and Jaguars for number 1 in the division, sort of like it was last year. So I'll give him flowers for that. Yeah, I do have him with the best record out of the three of us, 8-9, which I think 7-10 and 8-9 are both, absolutely possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, win over all the teams. Nathan, go ahead and close us out, man.
Yeah. So look, we love doing this, Josh. We appreciate you for coming on, man, giving us your opinions. Wait, did we ask you about the Jags? Did you give your?
I had my spiel. Easy to hate on the Jags.
Cool. So look, we talked about the Jags, we talked about the Texans, we talked about the Titans, Colts. In my opinion, and in all of our opinion, the Texans are going to kick ass this year. That's just what's going to happen. We're going to make the AFC Championship, and we're going to kick whoever's ass that is. And then we're going to go to the Super Bowl in New Orleans. And then we're going to New Orleans, Mark and Josh, and we're going to go tailgate because we're not going to pay $10,000 for a ticket.
We'll do a live podcast.
We're going to go to Harrah's, and we're going to bet it all on black. And that's how we're going to afford the tickets.
All on the Texans. What do you mean on the Super Bowl, dude? We're putting it all in the middle.
Well, we're going to use the money from that to bet it on that.
Yeah.
We'll do a live podcast from the parking lot.
Yes, yeah. I love that idea. I love it. We're going Instagram Live. We have like one person hop on. We're like, yes. It's gonna be great. Josh, amazing job for your first time on the pod. We'll absolutely have you back.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite, boys.
Yeah, of course. All I have left to say is David Johnson, happy trails. Thank you all for listening.
RIP.